Never been that visibly angry in my life. And it was all the bad shit I did, the fights, nothing. If I'd have been that guy in a fight, I'd have killed somebody.
When Mark Henry snapped for real, June 17th, 2013, Monday Night Raw, Mark Henry walks onto that stage wearing a salmon jacket, bright, soft, almost cheerful. He is carrying his wrestling boots. The crowd starts chanting, "Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Henry." He places those boots on the stage. That is the symbol. When a wrestler leaves their boots behind, it means the end. Henry starts talking about his daughter, about going home, about being a father. Tears roll down his face, real tears. The arena goes quiet. This does not feel like acting. This feels like a man breaking apart in front of thousands of people. John Cena stands in the ring, respectful, giving Henry his moment. And then Henry grabs Cena, slams him through the floor. The retirement was fake. The tears were real, but the plan was always violence. Here is the thing about wrestling. It is a show. It is meant to feel dangerous, but it is planned, coordinated, safe. Now, if you are watching this and you want to see more moments where the script fell apart, use the hype feature and give hype to this video. It helps us bring you more stories like this. Thanks. Back to Henry. That salmon jacket moment worked because Henry did not just fool the audience, he fooled his wife. She was watching at home, believing her husband was finally coming back to her. When he attacked Cena, she was shocked, almost in tears. Henry later admitted he probably owed her an apology. He fooled Big Show too. Paul White was backstage, crying as he watched his best friend say goodbye. When he found out it was a trick, he left Henry a voicemail. "I am going to kill you. You used me. You used my feelings." Henry had learned something powerful. He had learned how to weaponize the truth, how to take real pain and turn it into a lie so convincing that even the people who loved him could not tell the difference. That is mastery, but it is also cold, calculated, manipulative. And it raises a question. If Henry could control emotions that precisely, what happened when he lost control for real? What happened when the rage was not part of the story? To understand that, you need to understand what WWE is. It is a machine built on control. The promoters decide who wins. The agents decide how the moves happen. The locker room has a hierarchy, and that hierarchy decides who gets respect. Everyone plays their part. Everyone follows the script. But Mark Henry was different. He was not just a character. He was a legitimate Olympic weightlifter, Pan American Games champion, world record holder. He entered WWE with the physical ability to destroy anyone in that building. For most of his career, he followed the rules. He did what he was told. He played the characters they wrote for him. He took the losses they booked for him. He smiled when they told him to smile. He danced when they told him to dance. But there were moments, 5 specific moments, where the control broke, where Mark Henry reminded everyone what real power looks like, and WWE had no choice but to react. The earliest flashpoint happened in the late 1990s. Henry had just signed with the company. He was an outsider. He had no wrestling experience. Zero. He had never taken a bump, never cut a promo, never worked a crowd, never learned how to fall safely. But he had something the veterans did not have, a guaranteed contract, 10 years, worth somewhere between $250,000 and $1 million annually. In an industry where most wrestlers were paid per match, per crowd, where your income depended on your position on the card and how many tickets you sold, Henry was given a fortune just for showing up. The locker room hated him for it. They saw him as a mark, someone who got handed success because he could lift heavy things, someone who had not paid his dues, had not driven 500 miles for a 20 quid payday, had not slept in his car, had not bled for the business, had not spent years in bingo halls and school gyms building a reputation. The Clique ran that locker room. Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Sean Waltman. They were the kings, the political power, the ones who decided who got pushed and who got buried, and they made Henry their target. One story that circulated for years involves Sean Waltman, known as X-Pac. The allegation is that Waltman placed human waste inside a sandwich and gave it to Henry. Some versions of the story say Henry ate part of it before realizing. Other versions are less clear. Henry himself has vehemently denied it happened to him. He has even suggested maybe it happened to The Rock instead. This deflection is telling. It highlights the shame associated with the story. To admit to being the victim is to admit to a total loss of status. But the rumor stuck. And whether it is true or not, the rumor itself tells you everything. It tells you Henry was being dehumanized, treated like a joke, like something less than human. The fact that the story exists, that it spread through the locker room, and eventually to the fans, that people believed it could happen, shows the level of hostility directed at him. This was not playful hazing. This was not veterans testing a rookie to see if he had thick skin. This was an attempt to break him, to humiliate him so thoroughly thoroughly that he would quit. To prove that no amount of money could protect him from the culture of that locker room, Henry did not laugh it off. He could not. His pride would not let him. And in that locker room, if you did not laugh, if you did not take the rib with a smile, you became a pariah. Henry was isolated, simmering, building resentment with every rib, every joke, every reminder that he was the outsider. Observers noted that when he wrestled X-Pac during this period, he threw him around rough, like a teddy bear. Some said he was bordering on shooting, fighting for real inside the fake fight. The political power structure was inverted in the most frustrating way possible. X-Pac weighed barely 210 pounds. Henry weighed 400, but X-Pac had the power. He was protected by the clique. He had the ear of Shawn Michaels and Triple H. He could do whatever he wanted. And Henry, despite being able to snap him like a twig, despite being the strongest man in the building, had to take it. That inversion created a rage that had nowhere to go. Henry was a man learning that in this business, you either accept the humiliation or you become dangerous. He chose dangerous. The toxicity nearly made him quit. He was alienated, angry, deep-seated heat built between him and DX, between him and the clique, and the small men who ran that locker room, men he could physically destroy without breaking a sweat, held all the power. That reality ate at him. It built something dark inside, something violent, something that would eventually explode. In 1997, Henry broke his ankle. Injuries in wrestling are seen as weakness, and weakness gets targeted. Henry arrived at the arena on crutches. When he got to the locker room, his crutches were gone. His gear bag had been thrown into the showers. His belongings soaked. This was a classic rib. Force the rookie to hop around on one broken leg, make him look pathetic in front of the boys, make him beg for help, reinforce the hierarchy, show him that even injured, even in pain, he is still at the bottom. Henry did not hop. He did not search quietly. He did not play the victim. He went looking for the person responsible. He suspected the clique. Specifically, he suspected Shawn Michaels. Michaels was the WWF champion at the time, the top star, the golden boy, the man Vince McMahon had built the entire company around, untouchable. Michaels was standing near Psycho Sid when Henry found him. Michaels made a comment, "Aw man, big guy, they hid your crutches?" He was smirking, snickering. To Michaels, this was just another rib, another day in the locker room, another reminder of the pecking order, another way to keep the new guy in his place. Henry snapped, "Man, you think this bloke standing in front of you is going to protect you from me? I will rip you off the bone, and then I am going to put my foot in your backside." Some accounts say Henry went even further. "I will kill you and everyone you know." The room went silent. This was not banter. This was not playing along. This was not a worked shoot for the cameras. This was a legitimate threat of violence. Psycho Sid, a massive man himself, a legitimate tough guy, started breathing heavy. A fear response. Physical, automatic. Sid realized that if Henry decided to act, if he decided to follow through on that threat, there was nothing he could do to stop it. Michaels realized it too. He realized in that moment that his political power meant nothing. He could book himself to win every match. He could control the storylines. He could decide who got pushed and who got fired. He could manipulate Vince McMahon, but he could not control the fact that Mark Henry could legitimately end his life right there in front of everyone, and there would be nothing anyone could do until it was already done. Michaels went straight to Vince McMahon. He reported that Henry had threatened to kill him. He demanded action. He wanted Henry fired or punished severely. Years later, it came out that the clique had not even done it. Paul Bearer, the manager of The Undertaker, had hidden the crutches as a standalone joke. Bearer had no connection to the clique. He was just messing with the new guy, just having a bit of fun. But it did not matter. The truth was irrelevant. Michaels had laughed, and that laugh triggered everything Henry had been holding in. All the hazing, all the ribs, all the disrespect, all the stories, all the humiliation. It erupted in a single moment of lethal clarity. McMahon had a problem. He could not fire his champion. Michaels was the face of the company, the draw, the guy selling tickets, the guy main eventing pay-per-views. He could not fire his investment either. Henry was on a 10-year guaranteed deal, millions of pounds committed. Walking away from that contract would be admitting failure, admitting they had made a mistake, but he could not have a rookie threatening to murder the WWF champion. So McMahon found a solution. He banished Henry, sent him to Calgary, to the Hart family, to Stu Hart's dungeon. The dungeon was a basement gym, a torture chamber. Stu Hart, the patriarch of the Hart wrestling dynasty, would stretch trainees until they screamed, until they quit, until they either became tougher or broke completely. It was legendary in the wrestling world, a place where careers were made or destroyed. McMahon likely hoped it would break Henry, make him humble, make him understand his place in the hierarchy, maybe even make him leave, quit, walk away from the guaranteed money because the punishment was too severe. But it backfired spectacularly. The Harts were the enemies of the clique. Bret Hart had been screwed out of the WWF Championship by Michaels and McMahon in Montreal, the Montreal Screwjob, the most infamous betrayal in wrestling history. Owen Hart despised the politics that the clique represented. The backstabbing, the manipulation, the way they protected each other while bearing everyone else. By sending Henry to them, McMahon accidentally aligned his monster with the anti-clique faction. The Harts did not break Henry. They embraced him. Stu taught him how to grapple, how to hook, how to apply holds that looked cooperative but were actually agonizing, how to hurt people in ways that the audience could not see, how to submit people properly, how to make them tap before their joints snapped. Owen became his friend, his protector, his mentor in the politics of the locker room. Owen taught him how to navigate the backstage environment, how to build alliances, how to protect himself from future attacks, how to survive in an industry built on betrayal. Henry came back from Canada tougher, more skilled, more connected, and with allies who hated the same people he hated. The banishment that was meant to humble him had instead armed him. It had turned him from a raw athlete into a hardened wrestler with the technical skill to back up his threats. A few years later, another bully tried his luck. John Bradshaw Layfield, JBL. He saw himself as the locker room enforcer, the gatekeeper, the man who tested new talent to see if they had what it took to survive. He used verbal abuse, stiff shots in the ring, and physical intimidation to establish dominance. He ran something called Wrestler's Court, a kangaroo court where he would put wrestlers on trial for minor infractions and humiliate them in front of the locker room. He viewed it as tradition, paying dues, toughening people up, separating the weak from the strong, but it was bullying, plain and simple. And JBL decided to test Mark Henry. He threw Henry's bags into the showers repeatedly. He mocked his weight in front of the roster, called him fat, lazy, worthless, mocked his wrestling ability, suggested he did not deserve to be in WWE, suggested he was stealing money from people who actually knew how to work. He took liberties in matches, hitting him harder than necessary, throwing stiff punches and kicks to see if Henry would fight back or accept it. Henry, at this point, was still playing the sexual chocolate character. Gentle, non-threatening, comedy, a character designed to make people laugh, not to be taken seriously. JBL saw weakness, an easy target, a man who would take the abuse because he did not have the locker room credibility to fight back. But JBL miscalculated badly. Henry cornered him one day. Accounts vary on where. Some say the locker room, some say catering, some say a hallway backstage. But the location does not matter. The message does. If you ever touch me or my gear again, there will be no wrestling match. It will be a fight. That distinction mattered. A wrestling match has rules. Cooperation, a planned outcome, safety measures, referees, doctors. A fight with Mark Henry has one outcome: severe injury, broken bones, internal damage, possibly death. Henry was not threatening to rough him up in the ring. He was not threatening to work stiff. He was threatening to hurt him for real. Outside the ring, outside the script, outside the protection of the business, outside the rules that keep everyone safe. Henry later said it in a different context, talking to another wrestler named Ryback. Until you walk up to me and punch me in my face, the world will not know how violent I can be. That was the message to JBL. Test me, touch my gear one more time, push me one more inch, and find out what happens when the strongest man in the building stops playing by the rules. JBL heard that message loud and clear, but it was Owen Hart who saved JBL's life. Owen, who had become Henry's friend during the Calgary exile, saw the look in Henry's eyes. He recognized it. He had seen that look before. He knew Henry was not bluffing. He knew that if JBL pushed one more time, if he threw one more bag, if he made one more joke, Henry would follow through. Owen pulled Henry aside. He talked him down. He used logic. He explained the consequences, that killing Bradshaw, or even seriously injuring him, would destroy Henry's life. Jail time, lawsuits, criminal charges, the end of his career, everything he had worked for, gone, over a bully who was not worth it, over a man who did not matter. Henry listened. He respected Owen. He trusted Owen. He backed off. But JBL got the message. The bullying stopped immediately, completely. JBL never touched Henry's gear again, never mocked him again, never took liberties in the ring again. Other wrestlers were not so lucky. JBL tormented people like Mauro Ranallo, a commentator, to the point of psychological damage, anxiety, depression, eventually driving him away from WWE. He physically bullied the Blue Meanie, giving him a legitimate beating in the ring during an ECW reunion show, punching him repeatedly in the face until he was bleeding and bruised, but he never touched Mark Henry again. Henry had established a boundary of violence, a line that could not be crossed. And JBL, for all his toughness, for all his reputation, respected it. Henry earned permanent respect in that locker room, not because he was liked, but because he was feared. And fear in that environment was worth more than friendship. By 2011, Henry was 15 years into his career. He was a veteran, reliable, professional. He showed up on time. He did what was asked of him. He never complained, but he was not a priority. He had been stuck in comedy roles and mid-card matches for years. The ruthless aggression era had faded. The PG era was in full swing. Safe, Corporate, family-friendly, controlled. Sponsors mattered more than edginess. Henry was viewed as a utility player, a body to put in the ring to make other people look good, not a star, not a main eventer, not someone who could carry the company. WWE management decided to play a rib on him. Vince McMahon himself orchestrated it. During a SmackDown taping, they told Henry he had a dark match. A match for the live crowd that would not air on television. Dark matches are common. They are used to test new talent, to give the crowd something extra, to send them home happy. His opponent was Sin Cara, the high-flying Mexican star who had just joined the company with massive hype. The matchup made sense on paper. The immovable object against the aerial phenomenon. Big man versus little man. Power versus speed. Classic wrestling storytelling. Henry went to the ring. The music played. The lights came on. The referee stood ready. The crowd waited. But Sin Cara never came out. Henry stood there, alone, for nearly 10 minutes. 10 minutes of dead air. The crowd grew confused, restless, annoyed. Some started booing. Some started chanting for different wrestlers. Some started chanting for refunds. Henry maintained his character, scowling, pacing, but inside he was realizing what was happening. This was a joke, a prank, a rib, and the punchline was even worse. While Henry stood in that ring, waiting, looking like a fool, the office staff and producers had packed up and left the building. They wanted to beat the traffic, get home early. The arena was emptying out behind the scenes. The message was clear, brutally clear. Mark Henry's time, Mark Henry's dignity, worth less than avoiding a traffic jam. Henry exited the ring, and then he lost it completely. He destroyed the production area, tearing down lighting rigs, smashing monitors, punching walls, kicking equipment, throwing chairs, flipping tables. Thousands of pounds worth of damage. He described his mental state later as wanting everything to melt. He compared it to Darth Vader. Dark, consuming, destructive, violent rage with no target except everything around him. The staff who remained were terrified. This was not a worked shoot. This was not a scripted tantrum for the cameras. This was not part of an angle. This was a 400-pound Olympic lifter dismantling the arena because he had been disrespected one time too many. After 15 years of loyalty, after doing every embarrassing gimmick they gave him, sexual chocolate, the hand, Mae Young, every ridiculous storyline, after taking every loss, after putting over everyone they asked him to, after being the good soldier, this was the breaking point. Henry called Vince McMahon. The conversation was not a negotiation. It was an ultimatum. When McMahon tried to laugh it off, tried to frame it as just a joke, just the boys having fun, tried to tell Henry to lighten up, Henry cut him down with brutal clarity. Obviously, you do not respect me, and you damn sure do not fear me, so we do not need to talk anymore. Henry threatened to quit. I am leaving the company. That threat had weight, real weight. Henry was financially secure. He had managed his guaranteed contract money wisely, invested it, saved it, lived below his means. He did not need WWE. His body was breaking down. His knees, his back, his joints. Years of Olympic lifting and professional wrestling had ravaged him. The disrespect of the prank gave him a valid reason to walk away, to retire, to go home, to heal, and the sheer intensity of his rage, the destruction he had caused, the fact that he was willing to walk away from a lucrative career over a point of honor, forced McMahon to reassess the man he had employed for 15 years. The next day, McMahon called Henry into his office. Henry expected a fine, a suspension, maybe even termination. Instead, McMahon apologized. He said he was sorry. He asked for forgiveness. He acknowledged the prank had crossed a line, that it was disrespectful, that Henry deserved better, that after 15 years of service, he should have been treated with more dignity. But then McMahon did what McMahon does best. He turned emotion into money. He showed Henry the footage from the night before, the way Henry paced the ring, the scowl, the authentic menace, the way his presence filled the arena even when nothing was happening, the genuine rage radiating off him. McMahon told Henry he loved that anger, that intensity, that realness, and he wanted Henry to take it to a whole new level, to stop pretending, to stop acting, to channel his real resentment, his real frustration, his real rage, and turn it into a character. That meeting birthed the Hall of Pain. McMahon gave Henry permission to stop acting, to be himself, angry, resentful, dangerous, unpredictable. Henry went from losing to mid-carders to destroying main event stars. He was booked to injure people, legitimately injure them in storyline terms. Big Show, his best friend, Kane, a protected monster, legitimate heavyweights, men who had been booked strong for years. Henry was made lethal, tactical, unpredictable, dangerous. He was given a specific presentation, slower, methodical. Every move looked like it hurt. Every slam looked like it could end a career. Every punch looked like it broke bones. The commentary sold him as a man who had finally stopped caring about the rules, about playing nice, about doing what he was told. A man who had been disrespected for too long and was now taking what he deserved. And it worked. The audience believed it because it was not a character. It was Mark Henry finally being allowed to show show what he had been holding back for 15 years. And it culminated in Henry defeating Randy Orton cleanly at Night of Champions 2011. No interference, no cheating, no shortcuts, just dominance. He won the World Heavyweight Championship, the title he had chased for over a decade, the validation he had been denied repeatedly, the main event slot he had earned but never received, the prank that was meant to humiliate him, that was supposed to be a harmless joke at the expense of a mid-card veteran, had instead revitalized his entire career. It had given him the main event run he deserved. WWE learned a valuable lesson that day. Mark Henry was most valuable when he was least controlled, when the real man was allowed to bleed through the character, when the rage was not scripted but channeled, when the danger felt legitimate because it was rooted in legitimate emotion. And that brings us back to 2013, the salmon jacket. By then, Henry had learned the game completely. He understood that wrestling is not about physical moves. It is not about how high you can jump or how hard you can hit. It is about controlling reality, about making people believe, about blurring the lines so thoroughly that nobody knows where the character ends and the man begins. The Hall of Pain era had passed. His body was failing, legitimately failing. The injuries were piling up. The pain was constant. Every morning he woke up hurting. Every bump in the ring made it worse. He was thinking about retirement, actually considering it, discussing it with his family, wondering if it was time to walk away before his body gave out completely, before he ended up in a wheelchair, before the damage became permanent. WWE Creative pitched him an idea. Use those real feelings. Stage a fake retirement. Pour your heart out. Make it as real as possible. Make people believe you are actually leaving. Then turn on John Cena. Launch a feud for the WWE Championship. One last run. One last big money program. One last chance to main event. Henry agreed, but he knew the only way it would work was if the emotion was completely authentic, so he made it real. He did not tell his wife the plan. She watched at home, believing it was over, believing her husband was finally coming home to her, to be a father, to heal, to rest, to stop destroying his body for the entertainment of strangers. He did not tell Big Show, his best friend, his brother in the business. Paul White sat backstage and cried as he watched Henry say goodbye, mourning the end of an era, mourning the loss of a friend from the locker room. He did not fully prepare John Cena either. Cena stayed back in the ring, giving Henry space, respecting the moment, allowing him to have the stage. Cena seemed genuinely moved, convinced by the performance. Or maybe it was not a performance at all. Henry walked out in that salmon jacket. He said he was feeling salmon that day, that the jacket chose him. It was disarming, bright, unexpected, not the color of anger or aggression, the color of celebration, of peace, of endings. He placed his boots on the stage, the sacred symbol, the universal sign in wrestling that a man is done. The crowd chanted his name. Thank you, Henry. Thank you for 17 years. Thank you for the sacrifice. Thank you for the entertainment. Thank you for never giving up. Henry spoke about his daughter, about wanting to watch her grow up, about missing moments because he was on the road, about the pain in his body, about how every morning he woke up hurting, about how he could not do it anymore. He cried, real tears, streaming down his face. His voice cracked. This was not acting. This was a man channeling every real feeling he had about his career, about his body, about his family, about time running out. I am coming home, baby. That line hit hard. It felt true. It felt like a man who had given everything and had nothing left to give. The audience believed him. The wrestlers backstage believed him. His own family believed him. And then he attacked, grabbed Cena, lifted him, slammed him. The world's strongest slam. The crowd erupted. Shock, confusion, anger, joy. A mixture of emotions colliding in real time. Some fans booed, some cheered, some just sat there stunned. What they had just witnessed was emotional manipulation on a level wrestling rarely achieves. Henry had taken them on a journey, made them feel something genuine, made them believe, and then he shattered that belief with violence. It was masterful, cruel, brilliant, manipulative. Everything wrestling is supposed to be but rarely is. Big Show called him later, furious. I am going to kill you. I was sitting on the couch with my wife crying. You used me. You used my feelings. And he was right. Henry had used him, had weaponized their friendship to make the moment more real. Henry's wife felt betrayed, not by the angle, but by the fact that he had used their real life, their real struggles, their real conversations about retirement, as material, as a tool to work the audience. Henry admitted later he probably owed her more of an apology, that he had crossed a line, that he had taken something private and made it public. But the promo worked. It is still talked about today, considered one of the greatest of the modern era. Not because of the words, not because of the production, but because of the authenticity, because Henry understood something fundamental about wrestling. The best lies are wrapped in truth. He had evolved. In the late 1990s, he was a victim, hazed, humiliated, targeted, forced to endure degradation just to survive. The alleged sandwich, the missing crutches, the constant ribs, the isolation. He was the outsider who had to eat disrespect, literally or metaphorically, just to stay employed. By the early 2000s, he had learned to fight back, to establish boundaries through the threat of violence, to make people fear him because they would not respect him. The confrontation with Shawn Michaels, the ultimatum to JBL, these were survival mechanisms, ways to carve out space in a hostile environment. By 2011, he had learned to channel that rage productively, to turn legitimate anger into money. The Hall of Pain was not a gimmick, it was therapy. It was Henry finally being allowed to express what he had been holding in for over a decade. And by 2013, he had mastered the game completely. He was no longer reacting. He was manipulating, using reality as a weapon, controlling the narrative. He had become the one holding the knife, and he knew exactly where to cut to make people bleed emotionally. So what does all of this mean? What is the lesson here? WWE is built on control. Everything is planned, scripted, outcomes decided in advance, moves choreographed, promos written. The machine runs on predictability, on safety, on everyone playing their assigned role. But Mark Henry showed where that control ends. He showed that there are limits to what you can script, limits to what you can control. When you bring in a man who can legitimately hurt people, who has legitimate pride, who has legitimate emotions, you are introducing chaos into the system. And chaos cannot be fully controlled. It can only be managed, directed, channeled, but never eliminated. Henry was too strong to be bullied into submission. The clique tried. They hazed him. They isolated him. They attempted to dehumanize him with pranks that crossed every line of human decency. JBL tried. He threw his bags in the showers. He mocked him in front of the entire roster. He tested him physically in the ring. They all failed because at the end of the day, political power means nothing when facing someone who can physically destroy you. Henry was too proud to accept humiliation quietly. He did not laugh at the ribs. He did not play along. He simmered. He built resentment. And when that resentment finally exploded, it reshaped his entire career. The dark match incident was not just a tantrum. It was a reckoning. It forced WWE to see him differently, to value him differently. And eventually, Henry became too smart to be manipulated. He learned how the business worked. He learned that emotion is currency, that reality is a weapon, that the audience craves authenticity even when they know it is all a show. And he learned how to give them that authenticity while still controlling the narrative. The 5 moments we have walked through are not just stories. They are not just entertaining anecdotes about a wrestler losing his temper. They are case studies, lessons in what happens when the artificial world of sports entertainment collides with genuine human emotion. When scripted violence meets the threat of real violence, when a character is forced to confront the reality of the person playing that character. Henry did not just lose control in these moments. He seized control. He took the power away from the people who thought they had him figured out, from the clique who thought they could haze him into quitting, from Vince McMahon who thought he could prank him without consequence, from the audience who thought they knew the difference between real and fake. Henry showed them all that the line is thinner than they think, and that he knows exactly how to walk it. The Hall of Pain was not a creative invention. It was not some writer in an office deciding Mark Henry should be more aggressive. It was a documentary, a recording of what happens when you disrespect a legitimately dangerous man for 15 years and then give him permission to stop pretending. The salmon jacket was not a promo. It was not a retirement speech. It was a weapon, a surgical strike designed to cut as deeply as possible, to make people feel something real so that when the betrayal came, it would hurt more. It was Henry proving that he had mastered not just the physical side of wrestling, but the mental side, the manipulation, the psychology, the art of making people believe. And in the end, WWE could write the stories. They could book the matches. They could decide the outcomes. But when Mark Henry chose reality, when he decided the script was not good enough, when he tapped into something genuine, everyone else had to react. They had to follow his lead. Because you cannot script genuine emotion. You cannot choreograph authentic rage. You cannot control what is real. Mark Henry understood that, and he used it. He proved that while WWE might own the rights to his character, they did not own him. They could not control him. Not really, not when it mattered. He held the pen. He always held the pen. And the moments when he chose to write his own story are the moments we still talk about today. Because those are the moments when wrestling stopped being a show and became something more. Something real. Something uncontrollable. Something dangerous. Something that reminded everyone watching that underneath the scripts and the choreography and the safety measures, there are real people with real emotions and real power. And Mark Henry was the most powerful of them all. He showed WWE where their control ended. And in doing so, he became more than the world's strongest man. He became a master of reality itself, a master of knowing when to break the fourth wall and force everyone else to acknowledge that what they were watching was not entirely fake, that somewhere in the performance, there was truth. And that truth was more compelling than any story they could write.